let me introduce our next lineup. Our next topic will be cyber incident and data breach response planning, roles coordination, and engaging your staff. This will be presented by Caroline Mouton, the IT Whisperer, Clearwood Consulting, as well as Sharon Knoll, CEO, Da Vinci Forensics and Cybersecurity Specialist. Caroline has got a well-rounded CV with 25 years in systems development, IT service management, and information governance. She's been, at four continents and 19 IT service management departments. And according to Caroline, they're all the same. So there you hear it. Also, Sharon is the CEO of Da Vinci Forensics. Sharon is a business leader with formidable background in diverse areas, including digital business within both public and private sectors. Sharon started a career in retail as a trainee manager before moving to the digital world. She's an executive MBA graduate from the School of Business, University of Cape Town, and she's currently business with Masters of Management in Digital Business with the School of Business at WITS. So that sounds quite a mouthful. I'm sure the ladies will now want to take it away, and all the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all the IT delegates. Caroline and myself are pleased to be here, and we hope that you're going to learn something from our presentation this afternoon. As you've heard, Caroline is the IT whisperer and comes with a wealth of experience, and we're going to share that with you this afternoon.
Thanks, Sharon. It's very good to meet to be online today, and looking forward to giving you the last wrap-up of the last 10 minutes of this talk. Sharon has gotten an amazing amount of wisdom and knowledge to share today, so yeah, pay attention. This is going to be good. Off you go, Sharon.
Okay, so data breaches and cyber incidents can be far more than a temporary terror. They may actually change the course of your life. Businesses, governments, and individuals alike can experience huge complications from having sensitive information exposed. With our interconnected world today, a certain level of standardization is actually needed. And this is quite vital in the way that we manage cyber incidents and data breaches. So when we talk about an integrated approach, and that's what we're going to chat about this afternoon, cyber incident planning and data breach planning. A cyber incident is defined as actions taken through the use of computer networks that result in a compromise or an actual or potentially adverse effect on an information system and all the information residing there. That is taken from NIST. The South African POPI Act, Protection of Personal Information Act, as I'm sure you're all aware, has this definition. A security compromise has occurred when there are reasonable grounds to believe that any unauthorized person has accessed or acquired personal information. When we look at the European Data Protection Board categorizes these data breaches or any data breach according to the following three well-known information security principles.
An unauthorized person has accessed or acquired the information. So it's quite a broad definition. Could I ask for a sound check whether we are okay with Sharon?
So let's carry on. The European Data Protection Board categorizes data breaches according to the well-known information security principles. We have confidentiality breach, where there is an unauthorized or accidental disclosure of or access to personal data. Availability breach, where there is an accidental or unauthorized loss of access to or destruction of personal data. And then integrity breach, where there is an unauthorized or accidental alteration of personal data. So today's discussion, we're going to address incident and breach management approaches, as well as the people management aspect of planning your response. Now, we go across to the cyber incident or breach frameworks. Now, if you have a look there, Caroline, if you could just go to the next slide there. Yes, we have the NIST and the SANS cyber frameworks. Now, if you have a look there, you can see that they have basically the same components and the same flow, but different wordage and clustering. So you might ask the question, which incident response steps framework is better? And it does come down to personal preference. Does it make more sense to you to break containment, eradication, and recovery into their own steps, or keep them grouped in a single step? And then what you have to look at is what compliance obligations you have that could affect that choice. Now, today I'm going to look at two types of cyber incidents. The first one, operational incidents. These are events that have clear parameters and can be dealt with using existing resources and predefined procedures within the business. An example of an operational incident might include a malware infection or a lost laptop. Major incidents, abnormal situations or events which are beyond the scope of normal business operations and pose a significant threat to the company, its people, client relationships, operations, and/or reputation. Examples of a major incident would include a ransomware attack or an active data breach. Incidents come in all shapes and forms, and to ensure a common language for naming threats, you should have a cybersecurity incident taxonomy. Now, when we have a look at sort of this risk evaluation planning, I've categorized it into the two sides, the operational incident side and then the major incident side. But it might not be sufficient for your organization. And sometimes a more granular incident classification scheme is required based on the incident's impact to the business. Now, if you have a look, when we go to the next slide, you'll see how the incidents impact which team in the incident management governance structure. The one thing that I must let you know is that I haven't added financial information onto the risk matrix because it's quite difficult to quantify. When we look at incident management governance structure, okay, it will also depend on your organizational structure. I've got a few examples. So, for example, the group crisis team would be the CEO, the CFO, the COO. Communications could be marketing or the internal comms team, the group company secretary, general counsel, head of investor relations, and the chief people officer, if you have one. The major incident team will be the cyber team, the legal team, IT team, and communications. And then the operational incident team will be the network team, the database team, system team, and the application team. When I have a look at how I'm going to set up an incident team, there's quite a few examples that you can use to set up your team or get an idea. I've used the Google team, and what they've done is they've designated an incident commander who coordinates incident response and resolution. The incident commander selects specialists from different teams and forms a response team. The incident commander also delegates the responsibility for managing those different aspects of the incident to these professionals and manages the incident from moment of declaration to closure. Now, this moves into where we discuss crisis. Now, crisis communication becomes a critical part of managing an incident, and it requires an understanding of what people need from management and how to provide it. Most companies develop crisis plans that set up and train emergency and crisis response teams, and they establish procedures for them to follow. But the people needs of your workforce, and sometimes the people needs of your neighbors, shareholders, and members of the community may also have been affected by your incident and are just as important to your organization's recovery in the long run. Now, FUD. We talk FUD. The immediate reaction to an incident is the FUD factor. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's unstructured, that initial emotion when you hear that something is wrong, or when you pick up something has gone wrong. And when we talk about a cybersecurity incident, we always think about something really, really bad happening, but it doesn't always mean that it's a data breach. Rather, it's a general term used to refer to the fact that systems or records have been threatened. For example, an organization that successfully repels a cyber attack has experienced an incident, but not a breach. The current methods that most organizations use are simply not enough, and a long time between the incident and detection reflects that. Better question would be to ask yourself, how can I detect a data breach internally, and have I set the correct procedures up? And then obviously we go to one of the most important areas of a breach, both for your internal and your external stakeholders. And as a CISM or a CIO or a CTO, you know what you have to do internally. But it's the CEO has an impact on the external community. From a CEO perspective, it's important to stay out of the detailed response. The focus on external communications, there's a sort of quite an importance around public acknowledgement. The speed and quality of your response is essential. You have to account for the damage caused to your customers and vouch to take every measure of damage control possible. Be upfront about how vulnerable your systems were, and obviously to a certain degree, and what the ongoing risks are for your customers. How your response is part of a set plan and not a reactive countermeasure. And then the aftermath and the end result of the breach in terms of churn and general public sentiment. Have this discussion with your internal stakeholders as well. It's very important. Caroline, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Sharon. So what I'm going to talk about is when you've gone through your incident and you've kicked off your incident management, you understand that you're dealing with a cybersecurity incident, but very soon after that, you've got to start asking yourself the question whether or not you're also dealing with a data breach. And if you remember, a data breach can happen without a cyber incident occurring, and a cyber incident can occur without a data breach happening. And it's quite important to know when you're dealing with both. Why is it fundamentally quite different? Well, when you're dealing with a data breach, you're obviously dealing with more than your own cybersecurity issue, right? You're dealing with data that's affecting other people. It's personal information that's affecting other people, and there are legislations that apply that tell you that you need to report these things. You have notification schedules. You have responsibilities back to the various regulators or to the various data subjects. And you need to have your data breach planning needs to take into account that there's got to be a very good command structure, sort of a structured and controlled way of making sure who gets to talk to the information regulator, who gets to handle what is the timing? Are there requirements for you to notify within a certain amount of time? And you also remember under the different privacy legislations, whether it's GDPR or PAPIA or POPIA or POPI, whatever legislations apply to you, and it's important to unpack that up front. You need to understand up front which legislations apply to you, and then you need to understand whether or not you have a timing notification for the notifications that you send out. And it's very important that you have, right from the beginning of a cyber incident, assume it's going to be a data breach and start the clock, start timing, get somebody on as a log to start logging everything that happens so that you've got a record and an easy way to refer back. It's quite important in your incident planning and response planning and your communications planning to bear in mind that there are going to be different roles depending on the nature of the incident. When we talk about roles, GDPR and POPI have different names for the different types of roles, but fortunately they do align quite nicely. So under GDPR, we have a controller, which is what I'm using here. And under POPI, we have the responsible party. That's basically the entity who, the buck stops with you. You're accountable for the data. You decided to collect the data. You decided that this is what you want to do with it. This is for your business purposes. And you as the controller or the responsibility have the obligation to notify authorities. You need to be very clear about what those obligations are, who those authorities are. You need to be very clear about who's got permission and authority, who's allowed to contact the different authorities, because you want to make sure that that risk is being mitigated properly. The other thing that the controller does is that they control the communications. The controller should be the first one to go to the media. They should be the first one to get onto social media. They should be the first ones they have the relationship with the data subject, right? So as the relationship holder, they should be the first ones to communicate with the data subjects. When you are doing your data breach management planning and when you're practicing your plans, when you're doing dry runs, make sure that you're very clear about that. Especially with your suppliers. Your suppliers are what POPI or GDPR would consider to be the operator or processor. So two different words, means pretty much the same thing. And you want to make sure that when you talk about controlling communications, you want to make sure that your operators or your suppliers are aligning with your crisis communications plan, that they're not kicking off their own plan and running with it and notifying different parties. When they actually don't have the mandate as under POPI or GDPR to act in that way. You need to also make sure that you are in control of the data breach response plan and that you have SLAs with your operators, with your suppliers, to tell them, to be very clear about how they need to notify you about a data breach. If they have caused a data breach or if they become aware of a data breach, the clock starts ticking as soon as you become aware. So you really need to have timelines involved. It should be quite a strict SLA with your suppliers. But one thing I want to point out is when we start preparing for data breaches, you really do need to think about just thinking about the fact that we have got a legislation telling us that we need to notify different parties, that the clock is ticking. GDPR says 72 hours, you have to report it within 72 hours. Even if you don't have all the information, you have to report it. POPI basically says within a reasonable amount of time, but our regulator has referred to the 72-hour limit for the larger data breaches that have happened in South Africa. And one of the things you want to start thinking about is when you're driving your internal awareness training through your organization, one of the objectives that you've got is not just to tell people what POPI is all about or what a data breach is or what your data breach plan is. What you also want to do is make sure that they're aware of the role that they play to help you to minimize the risk. So what do I mean by that? If you think about your suppliers, they have a very different company culture to you potentially. Your culture in your company might be might have a very high power distance. You might have a culture that is very collective versus very individualistic. You might have a company culture where people speak up and feedback. Your suppliers might not, or it might be the other way around. You might be a financial services provider and your supplier might be someone who does marketing and is very creative, is a creative firm. So you want to think about the type of people that you're talking to. So when you're taking your communications plan to your staff and to your suppliers, you really want to think about the type of people that you're talking to. Even internally within your organization, it's not as though you have one culture in your organization. Generally your IT team has got a very different culture to your marketing team, who has a very different culture to your financial team. And you need to be aware of who you're talking to and what's happening. Your assumptions and your practices and your policies that you put in place will work. Usually they work within your organization because you develop a culture within your organization. You need your suppliers to react within a certain amount of time. How are you going to encourage them to help you? Besides maybe having contracted finances, penalties and SLAs, but you do need to encourage people to work with you, right? The other thing I wanted to warn you about is that when you go into a crisis state, the culture has to change. It's got to become top down. It's got to become command and control. Your incident commander has got to be an incident commander. They cannot have people second guessing them, making up their own mind, running off sideways, doing whatever they feel like doing. People do have to follow instructions during a crisis. For example, when your building is burning down, that is not the time to start debating whether or not the fire exit is in the best place in the building. You just go through the fire exit and you get out the building. Now, what are some of the ways that we help people to feel like they want to work with you and to feel like they don't want to debate your entire fire plan while the building is burning down? Well, one of the things you need to do is you need to make them feel safe. If you want me to respond or to come to you and tell you that I've caused a data breach, don't make me feel like my head is going to be chopped off. You want to make me feel safe. And the same is with your suppliers. You know, your suppliers are going to delay coming to you if they feel like their relationship with you is going to be on the line because of a data breach. So I'll give you an example of myself. This picture is the anatomy of a breakup. And this is basically the different stages, 7 stages of emotionally coping with the idea that your loved one is no longer yours. And you're going through, obviously, your shock, denial, isolation, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And when I was quite young, I was working for an organization. I was in the IT team, and I lost my laptop on an airplane. Well, to be honest, I have no idea what happened to the laptop. I think I may have left it in the back seat in the back of the seat. And to this day, I don't know. I think I remember putting it in my bag before I got off the plane. I know I turned my back on it once in the airport. The laptop disappeared. It took me 3 days, I kid you not, 3 days to report to IT that laptop was missing. Why? Because initially, I just told myself I simply had put it somewhere that I hadn't expected to put it. So obviously I was going to find it. And as soon as this meeting was finished, I was going to go and look for it. And then I decided that actually I went into the isolation phase where I was like, well, I can't tell. This is very embarrassing. I can't tell anyone. Then I went into the bargaining phase. I actually went to the airport. I got them to look through the security footage. In my very naive state, I really thought that somebody would come forward and just hand over the laptop and say, of course I took your laptop, but here it is. Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. Obviously, it wasn't. The laptop was gone. I was the last one to accept that fact. And it took me 3 days to report it. So what I want to say is don't use fear as a way to drive compliance. Provide people with a way out. Give people a feeling of safety and security that if they come to you and tell you they've lost their laptop, they've caused a data breach in some way, give them a safety net. Tell them that it's okay. And I just want to point out that right back from 2008, the ISO standard 38500 for corporate governance of IT has been talking about the importance, the focus for clearly communicating goals, clear communication, addressing human behavior, understanding cultural and behavioral change in your organization, understanding your culture and behavioral aspects of your customers and of your business partners. You can't drive POPI compliance or GDPR compliance or data breach management planning as though you're working with a bunch of machines that are all just going to line up and behave exactly the way you anticipated. People behave in very strange ways when they're under pressure. So how do you get people to start towing the line and come together? So I went away after many years in IT. I realized I needed to understand people better. And I went away and I did a degree in communication sciences. And one of the modules was Persuasive Communications 101. And what I learned there is that you can persuade people in one of 4 ways. You can induce fear. Fear is enormously effective, apparently, but the social sciences have found that it only lasts a very short amount of time. The other way you can do it is through guilt. Guilt apparently will persuade people to behave differently for a very long time, but you really probably don't want guilt as the foundation of your communication with your staff and your suppliers. A far more healthy approach is to have open discourse, to encourage people to come back with ideas, for people to bubble up information through the communication ranks, to have open discussions, and for people to present their ideas. And interestingly, they found that when you there's a thing called group polarization. And what that means is when you take people from different cultures and you put them into a group, they tend to form stronger opinions collectively than they would have done individually. So one way that you can leverage this in your organization is while you're busy doing your data breach awareness training, you could take people out of different departments and combine them into groups and do and have the communications and the discussions amongst the different cultures in your within your organization. And I would say even involve your major suppliers, people who are key business partners of yours. Have those communications, open discussions in multicultural groups around the table. Don't stick to your org chart. This is one time you do not want to stick to your org chart. Okay, don't train HR people with HR people. Mix up the HR people with the IT guys and the finance people, and you should see a much stronger culture forming collectively, that people will start understanding better why this is also very important and why their behavior really makes a difference. However, don't underestimate it. If this is a quote from a book that Deloitte produced, if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. It's called As One: Individual Action, Collective Power. And in it, they give a whole lot of different leadership styles for different types of culture organizations. And I personally use it all the time. It's enormously useful to me when I'm approaching a large organization. But yeah, don't underestimate trying to get people to work together. It is quite hard. Lance Hayden also said way back in 2016, he was saying that information security is going to basically, you're going to make or break your information security based on the way your people think they should handle security, or based on their attitudes and behaviors. One of the things I learned in communication sciences is that behaviors are driven by attitude. Attitude is driven by belief, and beliefs are driven by values. So if you can connect with people's values, you can influence their attitudes and their behaviors. And that is all I have to say about that. So Sharon will give us a bit of a rundown and a bit of a summary of where we've been, and then we will give you some extra resources that we make available through the slide pack and our contact information. Sharon?
Okay, so just a 4-point summary. Incident response planning. Build a predefined risk matrix to assist you in your organization. Organize your response team structures. People training, manage staff behaviors, factoring in the different cultures, as Caroline has spoken about. And then ensure your communication to internal and external stakeholders is done correctly. Thank you again for the opportunity this afternoon. And for listening to both Caroline and myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity.
Caroline and Sharon, thank you very much for that. It was very insightful. I wish we had more time, because the time just flew. It sounded like there was a lot more you could share with us. Just a question from my side is, like, how difficult is it, do you think, for boards to communicate transparently with internal staff, internal stakeholders, as well as maybe just external, like the general public? It sounds to me like some business leaders tend to be very, cards to the chest type thing when it comes to incidents. And then you read other incidents where there's quite a transparent process with, the North Hydro incident for me stands out as quite a memorable one, where there was quite a good, clear channel of communication.
Sure. Well, I think, it really depends on the nature of the data you're dealing with, and it really depends on the type of organization you are and the type of relationship you have with your stakeholders. But on the whole, I think during a data breach, it's really, and you have no idea how they're going to feel about this. You don't know how afraid they're going to be, how much fear there's going to be, how much uncertainty, how much doubt. You don't know what
Sorry, Caroline, I think we lost your audio there. Sharon, do you want to maybe take on that question?
So I think basically it also depends on the person who leads the organization. With CEO communication, you want transparency to your stakeholders, but also it depends on what you share and how you share, because you don't want to you want to come across as transparent, and you want to come across as that you're sharing good information, but you also don't want to share sort of the company secrets. So it's quite important that your stakeholder communication plan is something that is taken into consideration, and that the CEO, when he communicates to external stakeholders, he knows what to say and is comfortable with what he says.
Okay. And in the age of ransomware, with these lots of data leaks happening as part of this whole strong arming of getting companies to pay up, how does that affect a company's message? Is it anything that they can factor in as part of their response?
Caroline, maybe you want to answer that from a Poppy perspective.
Sorry, Vickers, I dropped off, but sound dropped off for a second there. I actually didn't get the whole question.
No problem. We're in the age of ransomware, where there's every day there's somebody getting announced that they've fallen victim, and then a couple of days later their data might appear on a ransomware leak site. How does that type of scenario factor into a communication with regards to what a company says and how they handle that scenario?
I'm sorry, I think I'm having connectivity issues. Sharon,
Okay, no problem.
Apologies.
Okay, so when it is a ransomware attack, I think the communication plan or the communication, the information contained therein, has to ensure that that when you speak to external stakeholders, the information that you disclose, people have a right to know what information of theirs has been leaked or that is out there on the market. And I think the most important factor is that the company is seen to be doing something constructive about that leak. They did have plans in place, but due to the ransomware or due to whatever the incident that has happened, the information that has been shared or even sold on the dark web and that they are doing something about it.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, Sharon, for that. Yeah, sorry, Caroline, that we lost you there. It was really a good session. I enjoyed it. Ladies and gentlemen, Sharon Knowles, CEO of Da Vinci Forensics, and Caroline Mouton, the IT Whisperer of Clearwood Consulting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.